The war room fell silent as another casualty report scrolled across the holographic display. Ambassador Trell watched the numbers climb higher, his three hearts beating in a rhythm that spoke of exhaustion rather than hope. 47 years of conflict had drained the galactic collective of resources, lives, and the will to continue fighting an enemy that matched them ship for ship, strategy for strategy. Commander Wrath slammed his armored fist against the table, creating a sound that echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. "We need reinforcements, new weapons, something to break this stalemate," he growled, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles. The other council members shifted uncomfortably, knowing what he suggested next would spark debate that could last days. "There is one option we have not explored," Wrath continued, pulling up a star chart that showed a small yellow sun in a restricted sector. "The quarantined world, Earth." The word hung in the air like a forbidden curse. Every species present knew the stories about the violent primates who had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times before achieving space flight. Trell rose from his seat, his robes sweeping the floor as he moved to address the assembly. "The preservation protocol exists for good reason. Humans are unpredictable, dangerous, and utterly lacking in the discipline required for civilized warfare." He gestured to the historical files that documented humanity's bloody past. "They fight without honor, use deception as standard practice, and refuse to follow any tactical doctrine for more than a single engagement." "Perhaps that is exactly what we need," Wrath countered, his eyes gleaming with something between desperation and curiosity. "The Dominion has adapted to our every strategy. They know how we think, how we fight, how we respond to every situation. But humans, they do not think like us. They do not fight like us. They are chaos incarnate." The debate raged for 6 hours before the vote was called. 7 members voted to approach Earth, 4 against, with 2 abstentions. Trell found himself assigned to lead the delegation despite his vocal opposition. "If we are going to unleash this force upon the galaxy," the Council Prime declared, "then those who understand the risk must be the ones to control it." The delegation's ship crossed into Earth's solar system 3 days later, moving slowly to avoid triggering the primitive defense satellites that orbited the blue-green world. Trell studied the intelligence reports with growing unease. Humans had unified their planet only 50 years ago, ending centuries of constant warfare between tribal groups called nations. They had achieved nuclear capability and immediately used it against each other. They had reached their moon, and then abandoned the effort for decades due to economic concerns. "They are watching us," the ship's sensor operator announced. "Multiple tracking stations have locked onto our position. Electromagnetic signals are flooding their communication networks." Trell nodded, unsurprised that humans would detect them. Their technology might be primitive, but their paranoia was legendary. The response came within minutes. Not weapons fire or panicked evacuation, but a simple message in multiple Earth languages requesting peaceful communication. Trell felt a strange sensation. Was it relief or disappointment that they had not attacked first? President Liu met them in a facility called the United Nations headquarters, a building that seemed modest compared to the grand halls of the Galactic Council. General Brooks stood beside her, his uniform decorated with symbols Trell's translator identified as medals for military service. The human leader's dark eyes studied the alien delegation with an intensity that made even Wrath shift slightly. "You come to us after 200 years of isolation," Liu said, her voice steady and controlled. "Your scans of our planet tell you we are primitive, violent, and unworthy of contact. Yet here you stand in our home, which suggests you need something from us." She folded her hands on the table. What could possibly drive the great galactic collective to seek help from mere humans? Trell appreciated the directness even as it unsettled him. He activated a holographic display showing the war's scope: burning worlds, shattered fleets, billions of casualties across decades of fighting. "We are losing," he admitted, the words tasting bitter. "Not quickly, but inevitably. The Dominion has developed a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. When it becomes operational in 3 weeks, the balance of power will shift permanently. Brooks leaned forward, his eyes scanning the tactical data with practiced efficiency. "You want us to fight for you," he stated rather than asked. "You want humanity's capacity for violence unleashed on your enemy," he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. 47 years and you cannot win. What makes you think we can do better?" "Because you do not fight the way we do," Wrath interjected. "You adapt, improvise, and refuse to follow predictable patterns. The Dominion has learned to counter our tactics because we are civilized, honorable, and consistent. You are none of those things." He meant it as a compliment, though Trell winced at the phrasing. President Liu stood and walked to the window overlooking the city below. Millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that their world stood on the precipice of a decision that would change everything. "We need 24 hours to discuss this among ourselves," she said. "If we agree, it will not be as subordinates or mercenaries. We join as equals, or we do not join at all." The delegation returned to their ship to wait. Trell spent the time reviewing what little psychological data existed on humans. One phrase appeared repeatedly in the analysis: controlled aggression. Humans had learned to channel their violent nature into structured systems, but the violence itself had never disappeared. It had simply been waiting for an acceptable target. When President Liu's response arrived 18 hours later, it contained a single word that would echo through galactic history: yes. General Brooks stood before the assembled military commanders from every Earth nation, their faces displayed on screens that covered an entire wall of the command center. Some looked eager, others skeptical, but all of them understood the magnitude of what was being asked. "They want us to end a war they have been fighting since before most of you were born," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. 3 weeks to prepare for combat against an enemy with technology centuries beyond ours." Commander Walsh pulled up the tactical data the Galactic Collective had provided, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "The Dominion fleet operates on strict hierarchical principles," she explained. "Every ship follows predetermined response patterns. When attacked from above, they execute defensive formation Delta 7. When flanked, they rotate to pattern Theta 12. She highlighted several battle recordings. "They are predictable because they are efficient. They have perfected the art of war." "Perfection is a weakness," Brooks responded. "Once something is perfect, it cannot adapt. It becomes brittle. The collective has been fighting the same war for decades, using the same tactics, making the same moves. The Dominion learned to counter everything because there was nothing new to learn." He turned to face the screens. "We are going to introduce them to chaos." President Liu joined the briefing remotely from her office where she had been negotiating with Ambassador Trell. "The Galactic Council has agreed to our terms," she announced. "We will have complete tactical autonomy for one operation, a strike against the Planet Killer facility in the Tertian system. If we succeed, Earth gains full membership in the Galactic Collective. If we fail," she paused, "Earth returns to quarantine and we never speak of this again." The discussion turned to logistics and deployment. Earth's space-capable military consisted of 3 carrier groups originally designed for asteroid mining operations that had been converted to military use during the Unification Wars. 50,000 personnel, most with combat experience in Earth's various conflicts, but none who had ever faced alien technology. The odds seemed impossible. "They gave us 3 days to reach the target system," Brooks said. 3 days to train, prepare, and pray that our equipment does not fail when we need it most." He pulled up the enemy defensive positions. 200 Dominion warships guard the facility. Our entire fleet would fit inside one of their capital ships. By every measure of conventional warfare, we should lose. Walsh smiled, an expression that made several of the other commanders lean back slightly. "Good thing we do not believe in conventional warfare." She began outlining a strategy that sounded more like organized insanity than a military operation. The other commanders listened, and slowly, their skeptical expressions changed to something resembling dark amusement. Aboard the combined fleet that departed Earth's orbit 2 days later, Trell observed the human preparations with growing confusion. Where collective ships maintained strict order and discipline, human vessels seemed to operate in barely controlled chaos. Crews moved with purposeful efficiency, but without the rigid formations he expected. Officers consulted with enlisted personnel as equals. Soldiers trained in combat scenarios that seemed to have no logical structure. "What is your strategy?" he asked General Brooks as they stood in the carrier's command center. Around them, dozens of humans monitored systems while others ran simulations of the upcoming battle. Brooks gestured to a display showing Dominion defensive patterns. "You see an impenetrable fortress. We see a machine that only knows how to respond to specific inputs." He switched to a recording of human naval warfare from centuries past. "This is the Battle of Leyte Gulf, fought with primitive ships and weapons. The smaller force used deception, confusion, and aggression to defeat a numerically superior enemy." He looked at Trell. "The Dominion has never fought an enemy that lies." "Lies?" Trell's translator struggled with the context. "Deception, misdirection, feints. We will show them what they expect to see until it is too late for them to realize what they are actually facing." Brooks pulled up the operational plan. "Half our fleet will make a direct assault that appears suicidal. The Dominion will respond exactly as their doctrine dictates. While they focus on the obvious threat, our real attack will come from where they are not looking." During the 3-day journey through jump gates, Trell watched the human soldiers prepare. They sang songs about war and death. They shared stories of past battles with laughter rather than solemnity. They cleaned weapons while joking about mortality. It was disturbing and fascinating in equal measure. Commander Rath joined Trell on the observation deck as they approached the Tertian system. "I have reviewed historical data on human conflicts," Rath said quietly. "They have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history, not occasional conflicts like civilized species, but constant, unending violence." He watched a group of human Marines conducting combat drills. They have refined warfare into an art form built on adaptation and survival. The species should have destroyed itself 100 times over, yet here they stand. The fleet emerged from the final jump gate at the edge of the Tertian system. Sensors immediately detected the Dominion defensive fleet. 200 warships arranged in perfect geometric formation around the massive facility that housed the planet-killer weapon. It was beautiful in its symmetry, terrifying in its power. General Brooks stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by holographic displays and human officers who waited for his orders. He looked calm, almost peaceful. "All ships," he announced over the fleet-wide channel, "execute Operation Chaos Protocol." He smiled. "Let us show them how humans wage war." The human fleet scattered in 40 different directions. It looked like panic. It looked like the breakdown of discipline. The Dominion fleet, watching from their perfect formation, prepared to annihilate an enemy that seemed to have already defeated itself. They had no way of knowing they were watching humanity's oldest trick: appear weak when you are strong. Dominion Fleet Commander Esrel watched the human ships scatter with satisfaction. His 30 years of combat experience told him this battle would end quickly. The primitive Earth vessels were fleeing in disarray, exactly as tactical simulations had predicted. "All ships, pursue and destroy," he ordered. "Standard engagement pattern Alpha 9. The Dominion fleet moved with mechanical precision, subdividing into hunting groups that pursued the fleeing human ships. Each group consisted of 5 warships, more than enough firepower to obliterate the smaller Earth vessels. Esrel monitored the tactical display, watching his forces close in for easy kills. Then the humans did something unexpected. They stopped running. Captain Hayes watched his pursuit group close to firing range before giving the order: "All ships, execute Serpentine Pattern Gamma." His 3 escorts began moving in ways that should have been impossible: random acceleration, sudden vector changes, spiraling trajectories that made targeting solutions meaningless. The Dominion ships fired, but their weapons cut through empty space where human vessels had been milliseconds before. "They cannot maintain those maneuvers," the Dominion tactical officer reported to SREL. "Their crews will suffer catastrophic physical damage from the acceleration forces." But the humans kept moving, kept dodging, kept dancing through weapons fire that should have destroyed them. What SREL did not know was that human physiology, forged in Earth's harsh gravity and evolved for persistence hunting, could withstand G-forces that would kill most species. Human pilots flew their ships like extensions of their own bodies, making decisions faster than any tactical computer could process. While the Dominion fleet chased scattered human ships, nobody noticed the dozen small vessels that had gone completely dark 30 minutes before the battle began. They drifted among the debris field from an ancient battle, looking like wreckage themselves. No active sensors, no heat signature, nothing to indicate they contained living crews. Lieutenant Reed's infiltration team had been waiting in silence, breathing recycled air and trusting that the Dominion would focus on the obvious threat. 15 minutes, she whispered into her helmet communicator. "Then we make our move." Around her, 20 Marines checked their weapons and prepared for what came next. The Dominion shield generator station orbited the Planet Killer facility like a protective satellite. Its crew of 40 technicians never expected direct assault. Their defenses faced outward, designed to intercept missiles and energy weapons. They certainly never anticipated humans in unpowered armor using maneuvering jets to cross the gap between a derelict ship and their station's maintenance airlock. Reed's team breached the airlock using a method humans called explosive entry. Charges blew the door inward, and Marines poured through before the defenders could react. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. Dominion soldiers were trained and equipped, but they fought by doctrine. They took cover in designated positions and returned fire according to standard protocols. Human Marines moved like water, flowing around obstacles and attacking from unexpected angles. They used smoke grenades that Dominion sensors could not penetrate. They threw flashbang devices that overwhelmed alien visual organs designed for different light spectra. Sergeant Cole flanked an enemy position by crawling through an air duct, an approach so undignified that Dominion tactical training never considered it. "Shield generator offline," Reed reported as her team placed explosives on the primary power conduits. 30 seconds to detonation. The team evacuated, leaving behind devices that would cripple the facility's primary defense. Back in the main battle, General Brooks watched the tactical display with the focus of a chess master. "Now," he said simply. The human ships that had been playing the role of fleeing prey suddenly reversed course. They accelerated toward the Dominion fleet with weapons hot and targeting systems locked. The shift caught SREL completely off guard. Prey did not become predators. Fleeing enemies did not counterattack. His ships were spread across the battlefield in pursuit formations, perfect for chasing but vulnerable to concentrated assault. "Reform defensive positions," he ordered, but his fleet needed time to comply. Time the humans did not give them. Hayes led his squadron in a strike against a Dominion capital ship that had isolated itself pursuing what it thought was a crippled human destroyer. "Target their command bridge," he ordered. "Make them fight blind." Human missiles, primitive compared to alien technology but numerous and fast, overwhelmed point defense systems. The capital ship's bridge exploded, leaving the massive vessel without central command. Across the battlefield, similar scenarios played out. Human forces exploited every mistake, every gap in formation, every moment of confusion, where Dominion ships relied on coordinated fleet tactics. Humans operated in small groups that made their own decisions. There was no master plan to disrupt, no central command to decapitate, just dozens of independent units all working toward chaos. The shield collapse around the Planet Killer facility was the turning point. Brooks watched the energy barrier flicker and die, exposing the massive structure beneath. "All bombers, you are cleared for attack runs," he announced, but he did not order them to attack the facility. Instead, human bombers vectored toward Esrael's flagship. The Dominion commander realized his mistake too late. He had assumed humans would focus on the obvious objective, the facility that represented strategic victory. Instead, they targeted his command and control. Without his flagship's tactical coordination, the Dominion fleet became 200 individual ships instead of a unified fighting force. "This is impossible," Esrael's tactical officer reported. "They lack the firepower for this strategy. The numbers do not support." His voice carried disbelief that bordered on fear. Trell watched from the observation deck of the collective carrier, his 3 hearts beating in a rhythm he had never felt before. "They are not trying to win," he said quietly, understanding finally dawning. "They are trying to make the Dominion lose. There is a difference." Brooks checked the mission timer, 58 minutes since the battle began, ahead of schedule. He opened the channel to all human forces. "Phase 2 begins now. Show them that we are just getting started." The Dominion fleet, designed for honorable combat between civilized species, was about to learn what happened when you fought an enemy that refused to follow any rules except survival. Commander Esrael's flagship listed to starboard, emergency systems struggling to compensate for the damage inflicted by human bombers. Without his central coordination, the Dominion fleet defaulted to autonomous combat protocols. Each ship's tactical computer took command, executing pre-programmed responses to enemy contact. In theory, this should have created a resilient fighting force capable of operating without central command. In practice, it made them predictable. Captain Hayes identified the pattern within minutes. "They are running program sequences," he told his squadron leaders. "Watch. When we approach from solar north, they rotate to formation 12. When we break off, they return to patrol pattern 7. He laughed, though there was no humor in it. "We are fighting computers that only know how to respond to specific inputs." The human fleet began testing the Dominion's automated responses like scientists conducting experiments. They would approach, trigger a defensive formation, then retreat. The Dominion ships would reset to patrol positions. Hayes used this predictability to position his forces exactly where he needed them. "It is like training a dog," he muttered, "except the dog is a warship and the treat is not getting blown apart." Meanwhile, 5,000 human Marines descended toward the Planet Killer facility in dropships that screamed through the atmosphere. Dominion ground forces prepared to repel the assault, setting up defensive positions at the primary landing zones. Their tactical computers had identified the 3 most logical landing sites based on terrain analysis and strategic value. The humans landed in 53 different locations. Corporal Davis's dropship set down on what the Dominion had classified as unsuitable terrain, a narrow canyon with steep walls that restricted movement and offered poor sight lines. Perfect, in other words, for an ambush. "They think we want good terrain," Davis explained to his squad as they disembarked. "We want terrain they will not expect us to use." Across the facility's massive complex, human squads employed similar logic. They avoided strong positions in favor of unexpected ones. They ignored strategic objectives to hit tactical weak points. Sergeant Cole's team landed on the facility's roof and began cutting through the hull plating. "Why use the door?" Cole asked, "when you can make your own entrance?" The Dominion ground commander, General Voss, watched his tactical display with growing confusion. Human forces were scattered across the battlefield with no apparent coordination. They ignored key positions to attack seemingly random targets. "What is their objective?" he demanded. His staff offered no answers because there was no logical pattern to analyze. Inside the facility, Lieutenant Park's demolition team moved through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans. The Dominion had built this complex to withstand orbital bombardment and fleet-scale weapons. They never considered that enemy forces might infiltrate deep enough to plant explosives on internal support structures. Park studied the facility's layout, comparing it to Earth's architectural principles. "This entire section is load-bearing," she said, highlighting support columns that held up 3 upper levels. "Remove 6 supports and the whole thing comes down." Her team began placing charges while other squads created diversions throughout the facility. The Dominion defenders fought bravely, but they fought according to training that assumed their enemies would do the same. They held chokepoints and defended strategic positions. Meanwhile, humans crawled through ventilation systems, scaled walls using magnetic grips, and moved through areas the Dominion considered impassable. Commander Walsh coordinated the ground assault from orbit, moving units like pieces on a board that only she could see. "Squad 7, fall back and make noise doing it," she ordered. "Squad 12, when the enemy pursues 7, hit them from behind." It was not elegant or honorable. It was effective. 2 hours into the battle, the Dominion defenders began to realize they were not fighting soldiers. They were fighting predators who had evolved hunting skills over millions of years. Every human movement was calculated to exploit weakness. Every attack came from unexpected angles. Even their retreats were traps. Trell watched the battle recordings in real time, trying to understand the human approach. "They are using psychological warfare," Commander Wrath observed. "Look, they broadcast music during their attacks. They leave symbols painted on walls. They want the Dominion to feel confused, off balance, afraid." "It is working," Trell admitted. He could see it in the way Dominion troops began hesitating before entering rooms, checking corners they had already cleared, firing at shadows. The humans were inside their heads. General Brooks monitored the mission timer. 3 hours, 45 minutes since the operation began. "All ground teams begin fallback to extraction points," he ordered. "Demolition teams, you are cleared to arm all charges." Lieutenant Park activated the timer on the first explosive package. 23 minutes until detonation. Around the facility, other teams did the same. Hundreds of precisely placed charges, all synchronized to detonate in a sequence that would bring the entire complex down from the inside. The human withdrawal was as chaotic as their assault. They evacuated through the same 53 landing zones, plus a dozen more they created on the fly. Dominion forces tried to pursue, but every corridor seemed to contain traps. Every open space offered human snipers clear lines of fire. General Voss ordered his troops to hold position and let the humans leave. "They failed," his second-in-command reported. "The facility is secure. Our casualties are significant, but the planet-killer weapon is undamaged." Voss nodded, but something felt wrong. Why would humans commit to such an assault only to retreat before achieving anything? The answer came 18 minutes later. The facility's reactor cores, damaged by precisely placed explosives that had compromised cooling systems and safety protocols, began cascading failures. The detonation was visible from 3 star systems away. In an instant, the Dominion's ultimate weapon ceased to exist. Along with it died 30,000 Dominion personnel, 67 warships caught in the blast radius, and any hope of winning the war. Brooks watched the explosion on his tactical display. 4 hours, 12 minutes, he said quietly. Faster than projected. He opened channels to the remaining Dominion fleet. "This is General Brooks of the Earth Defense Force. Your facility is destroyed. Your fleet is broken. You have one chance to surrender before we finish what we started." The silence that followed spoke volumes. Civilized species did not make such brutal threats, but humans, the Dominion was learning, were not civilized. They were survivors. Acting Dominion Commander Thera stared at the space where the planet-killer facility had existed moments before. Her entire military career, 32 years of service, had prepared her for many scenarios. Defeat at the hands of a species that had not even achieved faster-than-light travel was not among them. Her tactical officer reported fleet status with a voice that trembled slightly. 73 ships destroyed, 41 damaged beyond combat capability, remaining forces scattered across 6 sectors. He paused. Commander, the humans are regrouping for another assault. Our defensive formations are compromised. We cannot withstand a sustained engagement. Thera made a decision that would echo through galactic history. She opened a channel, not to the human fleet but to the Galactic Council. "This is Acting Commander Thera of the Dominion 4th Fleet," she transmitted. "I am requesting immediate ceasefire negotiations." The word that followed tasted bitter. "We surrender." The message reached Ambassador Trell aboard the collective carrier 4 hours and 47 minutes after the battle had begun. He read it 3 times, certain his translator was malfunctioning. A war that had consumed 47 years, billions of lives, and hundreds of worlds had just ended in less time than it took to complete a standard shift rotation. "How is this possible?" he asked Commander Wrath, who stood beside him reviewing battle recordings. Wrath replayed a sequence showing a human squad in close combat with Dominion troops. "Watch their movements," he said. "They do not fight as individuals, they fight as a collective organism. Each soldier knows what the others will do without communication. It is instinct built over millions of years of hunting in groups." He switched to footage of Dominion forces. "We trained for war, they evolved for it." President Liu arrived at the Galactic Council station 5 days later, accompanied by General Brooks and a security detail that made the alien diplomats nervous. The council chamber, built to accommodate hundreds of species, suddenly felt smaller with humans present. "You have achieved what we could not in half a century," Council Prime began. "The Dominion has agreed to peace terms including territorial concessions and reparations. The war is over." She paused. "We must understand. How did you accomplish this?" Brooks stepped forward and Trell noticed how the human moved with casual confidence that bordered on arrogance. "You were fighting the same war for 47 years, Brooks explained. "Same tactics, same strategies, same responses to the same situations. Both sides became predictable. You perfected your warfare, and perfection became your weakness." "Humans do not believe in perfection," Liu added. "We believe in adaptation. Every conflict in our history taught us that the side that adapts fastest survives. We have been at war with ourselves, with our environment, with nature itself since our species emerged. We learned to change or die." Walsh pulled up tactical analyses on holographic displays. The Dominion fleet operated on protocols designed for honorable combat between civilized species, she said. "They had rules, procedures, expected behaviors. We had none of that. We brought chaos to a structured battlefield." Trell listened, understanding finally crystallizing. "You lied," he said. "You used deception, misdirection, tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare." He did not sound angry, he sounded awed. "We used every advantage available to us," Brooks corrected. "The Dominion expected enemies who would fight fair. We gave them enemies who fought to win. There is a difference." He met Trell's gaze. "You asked us to end your war. We did not promise to do it your way." The Council Prime leaned forward. "What you call adaptation, others might call dishonor. How do we know you will not turn these same tactics against the collective?" President Liu smiled, though her eyes remained serious. "Because we choose not to. Humanity has learned to control our violent nature. We direct it, channel it, use it only when necessary." She gestured to the peace treaty displayed on the central hologram. "We could have annihilated the remaining Dominion fleet. Instead, we accepted their surrender. That choice is what makes us civilized, not our tactics." The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Earth had proven its worth. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity represented. 3 weeks later, General Brooks stood on Earth looking up at stars that no longer seemed quite so distant. A reporter had followed him, asking questions about the battle and its aftermath. "Are you proud of what humanity accomplished?" the reporter asked. Brooks considered the question carefully. "We did what was necessary, not what was glorious." He watched a transport ship climb toward orbit, carrying diplomats to the Council station. "We proved that humans belong among the stars, but we also proved that we bring our nature with us, our capacity for violence, for deception, for doing whatever it takes to survive." "Do you think that is a good thing?" the reporter pressed. "I think it is an honest thing," Brooks replied. "Other species have built their civilizations on honor, order, and predictable behavior. Humans built ours on adaptation and survival. Neither approach is wrong. They are just different." He turned to face the camera. "The galaxy now has to decide if it wants to become more like us, or if it wants us to become more like them." In the council chambers, that same debate raged. Some species celebrated humanity's arrival, seeing fresh perspectives and innovative thinking. Others feared the chaos that humans represented, but all agreed on one truth: the galaxy had changed forever. The Dominion, meanwhile, began studying human military tactics, not to counter them but to learn from them. Other species did the same. Within months, the phrase "thinking like a human" entered galactic military lexicon. It meant abandoning rigid doctrine in favor of flexible response. It meant accepting that sometimes survival required doing things that seemed uncivilized. Ambassador Trell, reviewing reports from the first human diplomatic missions, realized something profound. Humanity had not just ended a war. They had introduced a new variable into galactic civilization. The question was no longer whether species could coexist peacefully. The question was whether they could learn to adapt as humans did. Only time would tell if the galaxy was ready for the age of humanity.